1 year after my husband left for a lucrative bridge construction project in Germany, I secretly tracked his GPS and discovered him at a VIP maternity hospital, tenderly caring for a pregnant woman. I sold our $3 million lakefront mansion, left my paralyzed mother-in-law in a facility, and flew out of the country. 1 year later, my husband returned with his mistress and their child, only to be utterly paralyzed by what he found. It had been drizzling outside the airport windows, wrapping the Seattle landscape in a dismal, melancholy gray. It perfectly matched my mood at the time. The sterile voice from the PA system echoed through the terminal, announcing flight departures that blended with the rushed footsteps of travelers. Christopher stood before me, adjusting the collar of his coat. His handsome face projected determination, though his eyes seemed to harbor a deep sadness. He took my hand, the warm hand I had trusted to hold mine tightly for the last 8 years, and spoke in a deep, reassuring voice. "Natalie, just bear with this for a year at home. This trip is for our future, and for the whole family. The bridge project in Germany is critical. Once it's finished, I'm guaranteed the regional director position. After that, we won't ever have to worry about a thing." I forced a smile, fighting back the tears threatening to spill from my eyes, and straightened his jacket. In the 12 years we had been together, from having absolutely nothing to building our current wealth, we had never been apart for this long. Christopher pulled a debit card from his leather wallet, handed it to me, and spoke with what sounded like profound care. "There's $5,000 on there. The PIN is our wedding anniversary. Use it for Mom's medications, her adult diapers, and the household expenses. She's half paralyzed from the stroke, and her mood swings can be tough. So please, be patient with her. We'll have a massive time zone difference, but I'll try to call as often as I can." I nodded. I gripped the card tightly, as if holding on to his promise. "Don't worry, I'll take care of the house. Your mom is my mom. I'll make sure she's well taken care of." Christopher kissed my forehead, a quick peck that somehow felt heavy on my heart. He turned around and walked through the security gates. I watched his tall figure slowly disappear into the sea of people. I stood there for a long time, staring at the electronic departure board, silently praying for my husband's safety overseas. That night, I returned to our massive, intimidating mansion by Lake Washington. The sound of rain drumming against the roof felt like the night's heavy sigh. This house was once our ultimate pride, built on the blood, sweat, and tears of our youth. Now, devoid of the warmth of the man of the house, it felt vast, hollow, and spine-chilling. My mother-in-law, Mary, was lying in her first-floor bedroom. Her regular snoring was punctuated by groans from her aching joints. She had suffered a stroke 3 months prior, leaving the left side of her body paralyzed. All her needs depended entirely on me and a part-time caregiver. Seeing her toss and turn, I decided to play some soft classical music to help her sleep. I remembered the old iPad Christopher used for reading the news, which he had left behind for Mary's entertainment. I dug it out from the living room drawer. It still had a full battery. I unlocked the screen, intending to open YouTube, but my finger accidentally brushed against the Find My icon. The green radar screen popped up. Christopher and I had shared an iCloud account for years to sync photos and data. We had never changed that habit because we trusted each other completely. The map loaded. A blue dot blinked, representing my device at the house, and then I saw a green dot. It represented Christopher's iPhone. Normally, by this time, Christopher should have been somewhere over the Atlantic. His phone should have been on airplane mode or turned off, showing its last known location at SeaTac Airport. But it wasn't. The green dot was active, and it was neither at the airport nor in international skies. My heart pounded against my ribs. A cold sweat ran down my spine. I rubbed my eyes and zoomed in on the map, telling myself it was just a GPS glitch or a network error. But no matter how many times I refreshed the page, the green dot remained firmly anchored at a location about 40 miles away from our house. It was an upscale residential and commercial area on the east side. Zooming in closer, the location pinpointed the exact building of a luxury, private VIP maternity hospital. The flight bound for Frankfurt had left the departure board hours ago, carrying my love and hopes for a husband flying to Europe to secure our future. Yet, the husband who was supposed to be on that plane was transmitting a signal from a local maternity ward. That night, I sat paralyzed on the sofa, gripping the iPad until my knuckles turned white. Outside, the rain poured relentlessly, The wind howling through the window cracks sounded like destiny's mocking laughter. Was the satellite wrong? Was it a technological error? Or was the entire trajectory of my life a lie? 1,000 excuses rushed through my mind to defend him. Maybe he left a device in his friend's car. Maybe he missed his flight due to an emergency. But a woman's intuition, the terrifying gut feeling I always tried to ignore, screamed a naked, undeniable truth. I woke up the next morning with deep bags under my eyes and a splitting headache. I hadn't slept a wink, periodically refreshing the iPad. The GPS dot had gone offline around 2 a.m., leaving a massive, agonizing question mark hanging over me. When I went down to the kitchen, my phone buzzed with an iMessage from Christopher. "Safe in Frankfurt, honey. It's freezing here and the Wi-Fi is terrible. I'm just going to rest at the hotel and I'll call you later. Love you." Attached was a photo of a steaming cup of coffee resting on a wooden table. In the background was a slightly opened window showing a blurry, gray, European-style cobblestone street. On a normal day, I would have smiled, felt a surge of joy, and texted back paragraphs of love. But today, looking at that photo, all I saw was a horrifyingly deceptive performance. I zoomed in on the image as much as possible, scrutinizing every tiny detail. Near the edge of the coffee mug, captured in the reflection of the window pane, I saw it, a standard US-style Type B three-prong electrical outlet. It was the flat, grounded outlet found in every modern American building, not the round, recessed Type F Schuko outlet used in Germany. He was a brilliant actor. He had carefully staged the props to fool his devoted, suffering wife back home. But he made a mistake with the smallest detail. I held back a heavy sigh, slipped my phone into my apron, and carried a bowl of homemade chicken noodle soup into my mother-in-law's room. Mary was awake, lying on her side watching TV. As soon as she saw me, she scowled, her tone sharp and grating. "What took you so long? Are you trying to starve me to death? Hurry up, I'm late for my meds." I gently placed the tray on the nightstand, helped her sit up against the pillows, and tried to keep my voice calm. "I slow-cooked the broth so the chicken would be incredibly soft, Mom, so it's easier for you to eat. Did you sleep well last night?" Mary grunted, glaring at me. "Sleep? My whole body aches. Christopher is working himself to the bone to support this family, and you look like you're attending a funeral. You make sure you take good care of me so he can work in peace." I blew on every spoonful of soup to cool it down before feeding her. As she chewed, I casually asked, "Mom, Christopher's trip is so long, I'm getting worried. Do you have a contact number for anyone traveling with him? Just so I can check on how he's doing." Mary abruptly stopped chewing. Her eyes darted around, avoiding my gaze, before she snapped. "Excuse me? Your husband? Where he went? What he does? Why are you asking me? He's doing important business. Don't go calling random people and causing trouble for him." She pointed a shaky finger at me. "Go buy me some of those expensive joint supplements. The last batch you gave me did nothing." My mother-in-law's intense defensiveness and evasiveness magnified my suspicions tenfold. She knew something, that much was certain, but she was hiding it from me. Or worse, she was covering for her son. After lunch, I called our part-time caregiver, asking her to watch Mary for the afternoon under the guise that I needed to go to church to pray for Christopher's safety. Hearing I was going to pray for her son, Mary's tone softened, and she stopped complaining. I took my old Subaru, the car I'd had since college, and sped off. The sky was still dark and overcast, the damp air sticking uncomfortably to my skin. I navigated toward the GPS location from last night, driving into the upscale East Side suburb. When I arrived, I parked in the public garage and walked into the courtyard of the VIP hospital. It was a haven for the elite, boasting amenities that rivaled a five-star hotel. I wandered through the visitor parking lot, my eyes scanning for something I simultaneously desperately wanted and dreaded to see. Then, tucked in a corner under the shade of an oak tree, my heart twisted violently. The shiny black Mercedes with the familiar Washington license plate. It was Christopher's baby, the car he pampered like a prize. The car he told me he was going to leave in his best friend Brad's garage for a year while he was overseas. He had said, "If I leave it at the house undriven for a year, the engine will degrade, and it'll just take up space." I had believed him completely. I walked up to the car and placed my hand on the hood. The cold metal sent a shiver straight through my bones. In the passenger seat sat a pink plushy pillow, something childish and purely decorative that Christopher would never buy for me, and certainly would never use himself. So the flight to Frankfurt was nothing but a masterfully orchestrated illusion. My husband hadn't gone anywhere. He was right here, so close to me, yet living in an entirely different world I knew nothing about. The chill of the underground hospital parking garage seemed to seep into my very marrow. Even though I was wearing a thick trench coat, I pulled my baseball cap lower and adjusted my medical mask to cover most of my face, leaving only my bloodshot, sleep-deprived eyes visible. I walked among the luxury SUVs, the squeak of my sneakers on the concrete echoing shrilly. The elevator reserved for the VIP wing lit up. I slipped in behind a group of nurses pushing medical carts, trying to shrink myself as much as possible to avoid drawing attention. The digital display blinked to the third floor and stopped. The doors slid open. A subtle, luxurious scent of eucalyptus and lavender filled my lungs, a stark contrast to the harsh bleach smell of regular hospital wards. The VIP corridor featured deep burgundy carpet, so silent and serene I could practically hear my own heart hammering against my ribs. Relying on my memory of the GPS map, I slowly made my way toward room 305 at the end of the hall. The door was slightly ajar, casting a narrow sliver of warm light into the hallway, accompanied by the muffled sound of a TV playing soft music. I held my breath, pressed myself against the cool drywall, and peered through the crack. The scene inside was like a cold, cruel, jagged knife plunging straight into my trembling heart, shredding every ounce of trust and hope I had ever cherished. On the pristine hospital bed, a young woman with long, curled hair leaned against a pile of pillows. Her round, flushed face radiated happiness. She wore blush-pink silk pajamas, her heavily pregnant belly clearly visible beneath the smooth fabric. Sitting right beside her in a plush armchair was Christopher, my husband, the man who had hugged me at the airport just yesterday, whispering promises of a brilliant European future. He was carefully peeling an apple. His movements were delicate, attentive, and incredibly loving in a way I hadn't experienced in years. Throughout our 12 years together, he had never done this for me. He held a slice of apple to her lips, his eyes brimmed with profound affection and adoration. The warm gaze I foolishly thought was reserved exclusively for me on our wedding day. The woman pouted playfully and pushed his hand away. Her voice was dripping with sugary sweetness. "I don't want apples. I want that organic bone broth with the special herbs. Won't that old woman at your house get suspicious? What if she finds out you never went to Germany and you're here taking care of me and our baby?" Christopher chuckled. That deep, familiar laugh now sounded grotesque and hypocritical. He set the plate down, stroked her hair, and spoke with casual disdain. "You worry too much. That old woman is clueless. She does whatever I tell her to." I threw her a $5,000 debit card, and her eyes practically lit up. "I'm sure she's too busy playing nurse for my mom to ever check up on me. You just focus on resting. This little boy is the heir to my family. He's more important than anything else in the world." I stood frozen in the hallway, clamping both hands over my mouth to stifle the violent sob tearing up my throat. So, in his eyes, I was just a clueless fool, an old woman, a high-end, unpaid maid bought with the very money we had earned together. I remembered the years I spent clipping coupons, wearing the same frayed coats, refusing to buy expensive makeup, saving every single penny so he could start his business and reach where he was today. Now, he was using my sacrifices to fund another family, another woman, and the child I had yearned for my entire life, but could never conceive. Ashley, that was her name. I guessed it from the patient chart clipped to the door. She fluttered her eyelashes and smiled, rubbing her swollen belly. "You promise, right? Once our baby boy is born, you have to treat us right. I refuse to be a secret side piece forever. My son needs a real, respectable father." Christopher leaned down and kissed her forehead, his voice laced with grim determination. "Of course. Just wait for me to get my hands on the deeds to the land her parents left her. Once I have that, I'm throwing her out on the street. Then the Lake Washington mansion will be yours and the baby's. You can redecorate it however you want." Every word struck like a sledgehammer to my skull, pulverizing whatever remained of my sanity. I wanted to kick the door down. I wanted to tear him apart. I wanted to scream to the world and expose the monstrous face of this deceitful man, but my feet felt rooted into the plush carpet. I couldn't move. I caught a glimpse of myself in the hallway window's reflection, a woman in her 30s, wearing plain, outdated clothes, her face shadowed with exhaustion and dark circles from chronic worrying. Compared to the fresh, vibrant mistress inside, I looked like an absolute failure, but I didn't cry. Strangely, seeing my husband doting on another woman didn't produce a single tear. I only felt an overwhelming, acidic disgust. A wave of nausea rose in my throat. The plane ticket to Germany was just a decoy prop, a round-trip ticket that flew me out of a paradise of marital bliss and dropped me straight into a living hell where a human heart could be colder than ice. I turned and walked briskly toward the elevator, leaving behind the slightly ajar door of room 305 that concealed the filthy secrets of a marriage rotted from the inside out. I drove out of the hospital complex, my hands still shaking violently on the steering wheel. I didn't go straight home. Instead, I pulled into a quiet, obscure coffee shop tucked away in an alley. I chose the darkest, most isolated booth. I pulled out my phone and called Garrett. Garrett was an old college friend who now ran an elite private investigation and cybersecurity firm. When he heard my dead, hollow voice, he didn't ask questions. He just told me to send him the location and whatever info I had, and he would get on it immediately. I sent him the Mercedes' license plate, Christopher's phone number, and the hospital's address. Deep down, a pathetic, lingering part of me hoped this was all a psychotic nightmare. By late afternoon, as I sat blankly watching the condensation drip down my iced coffee, my phone buzzed with a new email. The subject line was succinct: urgent, file 1. The sender was Garrett. I took a deep breath. My trembling finger tapped the screen. The attachment downloaded instantly. Before my eyes appeared a barrage of photos and horrifyingly detailed financial records. This wasn't just a casual fling. Christopher had been meticulously building a second life, a complete parallel family behind my back, for a very long time. According to Garrett's report, Christopher had leased a luxury penthouse in the city's most expensive high-rise for Ashley 2 years ago. It was the exact building I had once dreamed of moving into because of its unparalleled security and skyline views. Christopher had flatly rejected the idea back then, claiming the HOA fees were extortionate and a waste of money. He wasn't frugal. He just didn't want to spend money on me. The lease agreement was in his name, locked in for 5 years, paid in massive 6-month installments. Attached were bank statements from a hidden subsidiary account I never knew existed. Every month, on the 15th, Christopher routinely wired $5,000 into Ashley's account labeled living expenses. That $5,000 figure danced mockingly in front of my eyes. It was the exact amount he had given me on that debit card to run the entire household and care for his paralyzed mother for a whole year. With me, he calculated every single cent, questioning grocery receipts and pharmacy bills. With his mistress, he hemorrhaged cash without blinking. I swiped through the surveillance photos Garrett had taken. In one, Christopher was in shorts and a polo, pushing a cart at Whole Foods alongside Ashley. They were laughing in the produce aisle, the relaxed posture of a devoted family man enjoying mundane bliss. There were photos of them picking out baby clothes at a high-end boutique. Christopher was holding a pair of tiny sneakers, his eyes shining with pure joy. There was even a photo of him kneeling on the sidewalk to tie Ashley's shoelaces because her belly made it hard for her to bend down. A tender gesture that broke me. Years ago, when I sprained my ankle, he merely tossed me a tube of icy hot and told me to rub it in myself. The nights he claimed he was working late, the out-of-state business trips, the client dinners, it turned out he was just driving across town to that penthouse, where a hot meal and a young, beautiful lover were waiting for him. I closed the laptop, feeling as though all the oxygen had been vacuumed from my lungs. This betrayal wasn't just physical. It was systemic, ruthless, and deeply psychological. He had deceived me with calculating precision for 2 whole years. I remembered the times I skipped meals to save money, the times I wore the same threadbare sweaters to budget for his business startup, the sleepless nights worrying if he was eating right on his business trips. All my devotion and sacrifice were a cosmic joke, a pathetic display of stupidity. My phone rang again, shattering my bitter reverie. It was Garrett. His voice was tense, laced with genuine alarm. "Natalie, I just sent you another file. This one is way worse. I pulled his financial histories and compromised some of his work emails. You need to brace yourself. This isn't just about an affair. This is legal and it's about your assets." I gripped the phone tightly. My voice came out cold and hard. "Tell me, what else could possibly hurt me at this point?" I was wrong. Human depravity runs far deeper than infidelity. What I was about to discover was infinitely more terrifying than a mistress. That night, I returned home around midnight. The mansion was cloaked in darkness, save for the dim yellow glow spilling from my mother-in-law's room. Mary was still in bed, her rhythmic snoring echoing through the silent halls. I quietly crept up the grand staircase and went straight into Christopher's home office. He strictly forbade me from entering this room, citing confidential corporate documents. But with him sleeping soundly next to his pregnant side piece, this forbidden door was wide open. I powered up his desktop. The screen illuminated, demanding a password. His password used to be our anniversary. But I knew that when a man's heart changes, his numbers change too. I tried Ashley's birthday, which I had seen in Garrett's dossier, 051-21998. Incorrect. I tried again. Maybe the baby's due date? Maybe the Washington license plate CA8888? Incorrect. Then I recalled the sickeningly soft look in his eyes at the hospital. I typed in Ashley's initials and the word, love. The screen blinked, unlocking the Windows interface, welcoming me into the secret sanctuary of my perfect husband. My heart hammered so violently I thought my ribs would crack. Following Garrett's instructions, I didn't waste time on desktop folders. I dove into the hidden directories on the D drive. Garrett had managed to embed a stealth spyware payload in a fake promotional email sent to Christopher earlier that afternoon, allowing me backdoor access to his encrypted files. What I saw made my knees buckle. I had to grip the edge of the mahogany desk to keep from collapsing. It wasn't just living expenses for Ashley. It was a massive, catastrophic web of financial ruin. Christopher had been heavily day trading cryptocurrency and engaging in high-stakes offshore sports betting. The Excel spreadsheets tracked hemorrhaging losses, hundreds of thousands, then millions of dollars in the red. His dazzling, successful CEO persona was a hollow shell concealing a gambling addict drowning in debt from high-interest loan sharks and shady offshore lenders. He had lost almost everything. But what made my blood run cold wasn't his debt, it was how he was paying for it. I found a scanned PDF of a mortgage agreement. It was for my condo in Portland, the property I owned before we even got married, which I had been renting out for extra income. The document showed he had taken out a $250,000 home equity line of credit, HELOC, from a predatory private lender. At the bottom of the signature page was my name, forged in a soft, cursive script that was a 99% perfect replica of my actual signature. He had fabricated a power of attorney to leverage my premarital property to pay his gambling debts. I scrolled further down. Cold sweat soaked my shirt. There were email chains with a shady defense attorney about shielding corporate assets. Christopher was systematically funneling funds, equipment, and lucrative client contracts from our joint company into a newly formed dummy LLC. The registered agent and sole proprietor of that new LLC? Ashley. He was gutting our company from the inside out, turning it into an insolvent shell strapped with massive IRS tax liabilities, and pinning all the legal accountability on me, the person officially listed as the vice president on the corporate filings. You animal, I hissed through gritted teeth. You absolute monster. Hot tears finally spilled over. So this business trip to Germany wasn't just a cover to play house with his mistress. It was a calculated escape plan to dodge aggressive creditors. He had meticulously orchestrated every step, setting his wife up for federal tax fraud and bankruptcy, while he planned to sail off into the sunset with his stolen wealth, his mistress, and his heir. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. I meticulously applied my makeup, ensuring my face looked as calm and compliant as ever. I called Dr. Evans, the concierge physician who had been treating my mother-in-law. Dr. Evans was a polite, somewhat timid man who catered to wealthy clients. I invited him over under the pretext of reviewing Mary's care plan. While he was checking Mary's blood pressure, I asked him to step into the living room for a glass of water. As he sat down, I slid a thick envelope across the table, along with a printed screenshot. It was proof of the massive kickbacks he had been receiving from pharmaceutical reps for prescribing highly addictive, off-label drugs. Dr. Evans, I know you're a professional, I started, my voice low and dangerous. But Christopher has been acting very strangely lately. Mary is practically comatose half the day. Her cognitive decline is staggering. I had a second doctor look at the regimen you prescribed. The older doctor began to sweat. His hands shook as he gripped his water glass. Mrs. Natalie, I only did what Mr. Christopher asked. He said she was having manic episodes and crying at night. He said she needed much stronger sedatives so she could rest, and so he could work without stress. Stronger sedatives? I smiled bitterly. Strong enough to turn a sane woman into a vegetable. Do you know that if the medical board finds out you've been chemically restraining an elderly woman without cause, essentially poisoning her, you won't just lose your license, you'll go to federal prison? Dr. Evans turned the color of ash. He immediately confessed that Christopher had coerced him into prescribing heavy doses of an antipsychotic drug, a black box warning medication never meant for long-term use in elderly stroke patients, as it induces severe memory loss and extreme lethargy. After kicking the doctor out with a promise that I would keep quiet if he completely altered the chart and prescriptions, I walked back into Mary's room. She was lying in a daze, mumbling incoherently. I gently lifted her head to adjust her pillows. As my hand slipped under the pillowcase, my fingers brushed against something hard and plastic. I pulled it out. It was an unmarked amber pill bottle containing tiny blue tablets. This was the drug Christopher had secretly handed to the caregiver, instructing her to crush it and mix it into Mary's warm milk every night. Holding that bottle, my heart fractured with a mix of horror and rage. Christopher was a monster to me, but he didn't even spare his own mother, the woman who gave him life. He turned his own mother into a prop, a heavy anchor to keep me trapped in this house, too exhausted from caregiving to ever look into his secret life. Just then, Mary stirred. Her cloudy eyes slowly fluttered open. Because she hadn't had her spiked milk yet this morning, she was much more lucid than usual. Her eyes locked onto the pill bottle in my hand. A flash of panic crossed her face, quickly masking itself with aggressive anger. She tried to prop herself up, her voice trembling but venomous. "Give me that. Those are the expensive supplements Christopher bought me. Are you trying to steal my medicine?" I stared down at her, my chest hollow with bitterness. "Mom, these aren't supplements. This is poison. Your son is drugging you so you lose your mind. Do you even know where he is?" Mary fell silent. She looked away, refusing to meet my eyes. And then, as if she couldn't hold it in anymore, she spat out a sentence that made my blood freeze. "I know he's not in Germany. I know he's with Ashley. He told me. She's carrying a boy, the heir to this family. So she knew everything. She knew her son was committing adultery. She knew about the illegitimate child, and she willingly stayed silent. She happily participated in the grand illusion to deceive me, all because of her archaic obsession with a male heir. What she didn't know was that her precious son was actively poisoning her every night to achieve his goals." I placed the bottle on the nightstand. Looking at the frail, bedridden woman, I felt a mix of intense anger and profound pity. She was just another pawn on Christopher's chessboard. I closed her bedroom door behind me, severing my emotional ties to the naked truth I had just uncovered. The unmarked pill bottle sat heavy in my pocket, but its weight was nothing compared to the crushing pressure on my chest. I walked toward the master bedroom, the room that was once our sanctuary, now a crime scene of deception. My eyes landed on the landscape painting bolted to the wall. Behind it lay the hidden wall safe where Christopher kept the family's most critical documents. My fingers trembled as I reached for the digital keypad. The old password was our anniversary. I punched in Ashley's birthday instead, 05121998. A mechanical click echoed in the silent room. The green light flared, and the heavy steel door swung open, revealing the darkest recesses of a man's soul. Inside, alongside property deeds and stacks of emergency cash, was a thick folder with a blue cover. I pulled it out. It was a life insurance policy with an astronomical payout, signed just 6 months ago. The insured party, Natalie. The sole beneficiary, Christopher. The payout, $1 million in the event of accidental death. My legs gave out. I collapsed onto the hardwood floor, the documents scattering around me. The numbers and legal jargon swam before my eyes like demonic curses. $1 million. That was the price tag my husband had placed on my life. Suddenly, all his recent caring behavior made horrifying sense. Him meticulously checking the gas stove, him insisting on taking my car to his buddy's garage for maintenance. It wasn't love. He was waiting for an accident, so he could legally cash in on my corpse. But the nightmare didn't stop there. Tucked between the pages of the policy was a piece of hotel stationery with Christopher's handwriting. It was a brainstorming list of fatal accidents: gas leak in kitchen, brake line failure on mountain pass, electrocution in master bath. Every word was a serrated blade twisting into my bleeding heart. He didn't just want a divorce. He didn't just want to steal my assets. He wanted me eradicated from the face of the earth so he could live in a billionaire's paradise with his mistress and son. Tears streamed down my face, hot and acidic. I sobbed silently, the terror and revulsion choking me. Death had been pacing around me for months, wearing the mask of a devoted husband. I looked around the cavernous bedroom. Every shadow felt like a trap. I knew I couldn't break down now. I had to survive. I had to escape the clutches of this demon masquerading in human skin. And more importantly, I had to make him pay in blood for his cruelty. I wiped my face fiercely. I took out my phone and photographed every page of the insurance policy and the handwritten murder notes. I put everything back exactly as I found it and closed the safe. The locking mechanism engaged with a definitive click, sounding like the slamming of a vault door on the last shred of my humanity. From this second forward, Christopher was no longer my husband. He was my mortal enemy. At 8 p.m., while I sat numbly at the cold dining table, my phone vibrated. The screen flashed. "Hubby," it was an incoming FaceTime audio call. My stomach churned. I took a deep breath, adjusted my expression, smoothed my hair, and switched it to a video call. Christopher's face filled the screen. He was bundled up in a thick Patagonia puffer jacket and a wool scarf, pulling off the look of a man braving the European winter. Behind him was a generic gray brick wall, with piped-in audio of distant European sirens and indistinct chatter. He smiled. It was that same bright, warm smile, but now it looked like a grotesque Halloween mask. His breath formed little puffs of white smoke, likely a cheap video filter, or steam from the coffee mug he was holding just off camera. "Honey, I miss you so much," he said, rubbing his gloved hands together. "It's freezing here. The snow is brutal. Walking to the site is a nightmare." I scrutinized the screen. Despite the fake snow filter, I noticed tiny beads of sweat on his forehead. It was a hot, humid summer week in Seattle. Even if he had the AC blasting in Ashley's penthouse, wearing a heavy winter coat under bright lights was causing a physiological reaction. I forced a trembling sigh, projecting the perfect image of a stressed, helpless wife. "Chris, make sure you dress warm. Please don't get sick. Mom is doing so poorly today. She keeps calling out for you. I feel terrible that you're working so hard over there." Christopher nodded, feigning deep concern, though his eyes darted around nervously as if checking to ensure Ashley wasn't walking into the frame. "I know, honey. Just take good care of her for me. We're at a critical phase in the build. I can't fly back. How are the bills? Is the money I left you holding up?" Money. It was always about the money. I knew he was suffocating under his gambling debts. He was terrified I would overdraft the checking account or discover the corporate accounts were completely drained. I cast my eyes downward, letting a fake sob hitch in my throat. "Chris, I need to talk to you about something serious. Mom's condition is deteriorating fast. Doctor, Evan says she needs emergency surgery and specialized imported medications. The money you left isn't going to cover it. The corporate accounts are frozen. The bank said something about a tax audit." I saw him flinch. He nearly dropped his mug. "I was thinking," I continued, my voice trembling with manufactured desperation. "What if we sell this house? We can use the cash for Mom's surgery, and I can wire the rest to you for your investments in Germany. I heard the real estate market is about to crash. We should sell now before we lose equity. I just want what's best for our family." Christopher's face drained of color. His voice cracked. "Sell the house? Are you insane? That's our dream home. We worked our whole lives for it. You can't just sell it. If Mom needs meds, we'll figure it out. I'll get an advance. Do not touch the house." His reaction was far more violent than I anticipated. This house was his crown jewel, the last unencumbered asset he was planning to liquidate to pay off the loan sharks once I was out of the picture. If I sold it, his entire exit strategy evaporated. I acted terrified by his shouting. But the doctor said she might not make it. Chris, they're threatening to send to collections." Realizing he was losing his temper, Christopher immediately lowered his voice, pivoting back to the loving husband routine. "I'm sorry, babe. I'm just incredibly stressed out here. Don't panic. Let me review the finances and I'll get back to you. I have to run to a meeting with the German engineers. I love you." The screen went black. I sat alone in the dark dining room. His panic confirmed everything. He needed this house intact. I set the phone down and smiled, a freezing, venomous smile. "You want to keep the house? Watch how fast I burn it to the ground." The next morning, before the fog had even lifted off Lake Washington, I called Brenda, an aggressive, top-tier luxury real estate broker I knew. I met her at a discreet coffee shop downtown. Seeing my gaunt, fiercely determined face a stark contrast to the submissive wife she usually knew, Brenda was shocked. "I need to sell the waterfront house. Immediately," I stated, skipping the pleasantries. Brenda dropped her pen. "Natalie, what are you talking about? That's prime Mercer Island real estate. Chris loves that house. Did he approve this?" I took a slow sip of my black coffee, staring dead into her eyes. "My husband is overseas. He's delegated full authority to me. Brenda, I'll be honest. Chris's overseas venture collapsed. He is severely in debt to some very dangerous private lenders. They are looking for him. I have to liquidate the house to pay them off, or we are in physical danger." I spun a highly believable narrative. "Sell it as a pocket listing, off-market. I don't care if you have to list it $500,000 under market value. I just need a cash buyer who can close escrow in 5 days." Smelling blood in the water and a massive commission, Brenda's eyes widened. "Oh my God, I am so sorry. Yes, absolutely. At a discount like that, my developer clients will literally fight over it." Within hours, rumors of a distressed fire sale waterfront mansion circulated through elite investment circles. I knew Christopher had eyes and ears in the city. The rumor would eventually reach him or his creditors. He would panic, but he couldn't show his face. If he magically appeared in Seattle to stop the sale, his Germany alibi would shatter, and he'd have to face the loan sharks. He was trapped in his own web, and I was slowly tightening the noose. That afternoon, Brenda brought a buyer by a quiet, wealthy tech investor. In reality, he was an associate of Garrett's, acting as a proxy to expedite the cash transaction and obscure the money trail from Christopher. He did a brief walkthrough and immediately signed a hard money contract, wiring a massive, non-refundable earnest deposit directly into an independent escrow account. Holding the escrow receipt, I felt no joy. I was selling my past, selling my memories, selling my naive innocence in exchange for my life. After securing the sale, I drove to a sketchy strip mall and bought a prepaid burner phone. Sitting in the driver's seat, my hands trembled slightly as I initiated the next phase. I didn't hate Ashley. In fact, compared to the inferno of rage I felt for Christopher, I almost pitied her. She was just another piece of meat being fattened up for the slaughter in his grand scheme. I opened the photos I took of the safe. Beneath my $1M policy, there was a second policy. The insured, Ashley. The beneficiary, Christopher. The payout, $500,000. Signed 2 months ago, exactly when her pregnancy began to show. He wasn't just planning to kill me. He had monetized the risk of Ashley dying in childbirth, or perhaps planned a tragic postpartum accident for her, too. He wanted the son, and he wanted the cash. Women were just disposable stepping stones. I drafted a text and sent it to Ashley's number. "You think you're his true love? You're just a pig waiting for the butcher. Look at this before you plan your nursery." I attached the photo of her life insurance policy, circling Christopher's name as the sole beneficiary. I hit send. My heart raced. Less than 5 minutes later, the burner phone rang. It was Ashley. I let it ring several times before answering. I said nothing. Through the receiver, I heard the hyperventilating, panicked voice of a terrified young woman. "Hello? Who is this? Who sent this to me? Why do you have this?" Her voice cracked into a sob. She was likely hiding in a bathroom away from Christopher. I lowered my voice, making it sound cold and metallic. "It doesn't matter who I am. What matters is that you are in extreme danger. You think he loves you? He loves your unborn baby, and he loves that $500,000 payout if you happen to die on the operating table or slip down the stairs." Ashley fell silent. Only her ragged breathing came through the line. Then she cried out, "That's impossible. He loves me. He's going to leave his wife for me. You're lying. You're his jealous wife, aren't you?" I laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "Believe whatever you want, but ask yourself why he secretly took out a life insurance policy on you. Why is he hiding so much from you? I trusted him too, and right now I am selling my house to pay off his gambling debts to the mob. Wake up, little girl, before you end up in a body bag. I hung up, pulled the SIM card out, snapped it in half, and tossed it out the car window. The seed of absolute terror had been planted. A pregnant woman is highly vulnerable and hypervigilant. Once she started doubting him, she would notice the cracks in his facade. When two women betrayed by the same monster share the same realization, that man has nowhere left to run. Later that afternoon, a torrential Seattle downpour washed over the city. I drove to a sleek high-rise downtown to meet Jonathan, a brilliant, cutthroat divorce and asset recovery attorney. I laid the thick folder of Garrett's evidence on his desk. Jonathan, usually unflappable, turned pale as he flipped through the forged HELOC, the LLC documents, and finally, the life insurance policy with the handwritten murder notes. Jonathan slammed his fist on the desk. Natalie, you are living with a psychopath. This isn't just financial fraud. This is conspiracy to commit murder. The break line notes, this is premeditated. I sat across from him, my hands folded tightly in my lap to hide the tremors. My voice was eerily calm. I know. That's why I need you. I want a divorce, but not yet. I need to issue a full power of attorney to you. I have to disappear, Jonathan. Every day I stay visible is a day he might decide to accelerate his timeline. Jonathan nodded vigorously. Go, as far away as possible. I will handle the forensic accounting and the criminal referrals. With the forged signatures, the doctor's coercion, and the murder plot, we won't just take his assets, we'll bury him under a federal indictment. We rapidly drafted the legal paperwork. I signed every page, the black ink bleeding into the paper like scars. Then, I executed the final, fatal strike to Christopher's empire. I wired the multi-million-dollar cash proceeds from the house sale, along with every single cent from my personal savings and the remaining liquid joint accounts, into a heavily fortified offshore trust Jonathan had set up for me. This was the money I had saved over 12 years. It was now my war chest for survival. Watching the transfer successful notification pop up on my phone, I felt a bitter relief. After a failed marriage, I had no house, no husband, no family, only myself, and an ironclad will to survive. I left the law office. The rain had stopped, and the city lights twinkled in the dusk. I was entirely alone, standing at the crossroads of my life. When I got home, the massive kitchen filled with the aroma of a classic American pot roast, garlic mashed potatoes, and roasted asparagus. It was a hearty, comforting meal, the kind Mary always praised when I cooked. I set the dining table with our best fine china and lit a centerpiece candle. It looked like a warm, loving family dinner. But for me, it was the Last Supper. The closing ceremony to a family I had bled for. I wheeled Mary out of her room. She was much more alert today, primarily because I had thrown away Christopher's spiked pills days ago. She looked at the feast, her eyes glittering with greed, though her mouth remained a fountain of venom. Did you win the lottery? Why are you wasting money on a feast? You need to budget the money Christopher sends. He's working himself to death in Europe while you lounge around spending his cash. I smiled a dead, chilling smile that didn't reach my eyes and served her a tender piece of beef. The meat is very soft, Mom. I wanted to cook you a wonderful meal today, to celebrate your recovery. Mary grunted and started eating ravenously. Watching her shovel food into her mouth without an ounce of guilt, a profound sadness washed over me. This woman, whom I had bathed, fed, and treated like my own mother, was completely hollow. When she was full, I put down my fork and stared directly into her eyes. Mom, let me ask you one last time. Do you know where Christopher is? Did he really go to Germany? Mary froze, a piece of roast beef hovering near her mouth. Her eyes darted wildly like a cornered rat. She slammed her fork down and shrieked, "What are you talking about? If he's not in Germany, where is he? He called me. He said it's snowing. You are a paranoid, jealous, ungrateful wife. He's out there building an empire and you're interrogating an old sick woman." The lies flowed from her mouth with practiced ease. She defended her son blindly, defying reality, defying basic morality. "Yes, I know. I was just asking," I replied softly. I stood up and began clearing the plates. I had my answer, and I had finalized my decision regarding her fate. I wasn't going to leave her in the mansion because the new owners were taking possession in 48 hours, but I wasn't taking her with me either. I was done being the unpaid hospice nurse for a family of vipers. Later that evening, the closing agent arrived. He reviewed the deed, verified the signatures, and authorized the release of funds. My phone pinged. The escrow wire had hit my offshore account. "Thank you, Natalie. You have 48 hours to vacate. We will change the locks on Thursday," the agent said crisply before leaving. I didn't sit around mourning. I called a premium estate liquidation company. "I need everything gone tonight. The imported Italian leather sofas, the walnut dining set, the $20,000 home theater system, haul it all away." I sold it all for pennies on the dollar. I wanted his scent, his presence, his ego completely erased from the earth. Watching the movers strip the house bare, the echoing footsteps against the hardwood floors sounded like liberation. I kept only one suitcase of clothes, my passport, and a photo of my late parents. The next morning, I woke Mary up and dressed her in clean clothes. She looked around the cavernous, empty house in sheer panic. "Where is all the furniture? Were we robbed?" I calmly brushed her hair. "No one robbed us, Mom. I'm taking you to a specialized clinic today. The doctor said you need inpatient monitoring. I'm having the house renovated for when Christopher gets back." Hearing her son's name, Mary's eyes lit up. She instantly forgot the empty house. I wheeled her into a waiting medical transport van. We drove to a state-of-the-art, high-end nursing facility on the outskirts of the city. I had prepaid for exactly 1 year of care using the funds from the house. It was the absolute best facility money could buy, my final act of mercy as a daughter-in-law. I wheeled her into the grand lobby. Mary looked around at the other elderly residents. She eyed me suspiciously. "Is this a hospital? Why does it look like an old folks' home?" "It's a premium rehab center, Mom. The nurses here will take far better care of you than I ever could." I knelt beside her wheelchair. My eyes fell on the vintage emerald and jade bracelet circling her frail wrist. It was an heirloom from my late mother. On my wedding day, I had foolishly gifted it to Mary as a sign of respect, begging her to accept me as her own daughter. For 12 years, I received only abuse in return. I took her hand and firmly unclasped the bracelet. Mary gasped, snatching her hand back. "What are you doing? Are you robbing me? That's mine." I gripped her wrist, staring into her dark, selfish eyes. My voice was glacial. "Mom, this is my mother's heirloom. I let you borrow it for 12 years. I'm taking it back. You never deserved to wear it." I pulled the jade bracelet free. The cool stone against my palm felt like a blessing from my mother. Mary screamed and thrashed, but the facility nurses quickly rushed over, gently soothing her and wheeling her down the hall. She looked back at me, her anger morphing into sheer terror as she realized I was standing perfectly still, making no move to follow her. "Natalie, where are you going? Don't leave me here, Natalie." Her voice echoed tragically down the corridor. I didn't look back. I walked out the sliding glass doors, took a deep breath of the crisp Seattle air, and hailed a cab to SeaTac Airport. Glancing down at my left hand, the faint tan line where my wedding ring used to be was the only evidence I had ever been married. 1 year passed. Through the grapevine of old neighbors and the legal updates from Jonathan, I pieced together the glorious tragedy of Christopher's return. It was a sweltering summer afternoon. A taxi pulled up to the gates of the Lake Washington mansion. Christopher stepped out, wearing a sharp gray suit, his hair slicked back, projecting the aura of a conquering king returning from Europe. Ashley stepped out behind him, holding a crying 1-year-old baby boy. She looked utterly exhausted. Christopher swaggered up to the wrought iron gate and confidently stuck his key into the lock. He yelled, "Natalie, open the gate! Your husband is home. What's taking so long?" The key jammed. It didn't turn. Christopher cursed under his breath and rattled the heavy iron bars. He assumed I was throwing a tantrum and had changed the locks to spite him for being gone so long. Ashley stood behind him, looking at the manicured lawns. "Just call her. Tell her to pack her bags so my baby and I can go inside. I'm sweating out here." Christopher frantically jammed the doorbell. Silence. He pulled out his phone to call me, only to remember my number had been disconnected for a year. Rage boiling over, he started kicking the gate, screaming obscenities that caused the wealthy neighbors to peek out of their windows in disgust. Finally, The massive mahogany front doors swung open, but it wasn't me. A massive, heavily tattooed man in a tank top stepped out, holding the leash of a snarling 100-pound German shepherd. The man glared at Christopher through the gate. "Who the hell are you? And why are you kicking my gate?" Christopher froze, his face draining of color. "You? Who are you? Why are you in my house? Where is my wife?" The tattooed man scoffed and spit on the driveway. "Your house? Are you high? I bought this place a year ago. Title is in my name. I don't know any Natalie. The previous owner fire-sold it to pay off debts and left the country." "You're lying!" Christopher shrieked. "This is my house. I was overseas. She couldn't sell it without my signature. You're a squatter." The man didn't argue. He walked back inside, grabbed a copy of the closing deed, and shoved it through the iron bars into Christopher's chest. "Read it and weep, buddy. Notarized signatures from both of you. She had a full power of attorney. Now get off my property before I release the dog." Christopher stared at the paper. There was his signature, right next to mine. His mind short-circuited. He remembered the massive stack of corporate restructuring documents he had hastily signed to set up the dummy LLC before his fake trip. He had signed a blanket power of attorney without reading it. Ashley snatched the paper from him. Realizing they were locked out of the multi-million-dollar paradise she was promised, she lost her mind. "You lied to me!" she screamed, hitting him. "You said I was going to be the lady of this house. You're completely broke. You're a fraud." The baby wailed. The dog barked. The neighbors whispered. Christopher stood on the sidewalk, utterly humiliated. His delusion of returning as a king dissolved into thin air. Evicted by the new owner and assaulted by his mistress on the street, he had to drag Ashley back into the cab and retreat in shame. Sitting in a cheap motel room later that week, his bank accounts frozen, Christopher suddenly remembered his mother, Mary. Natalie wouldn't abandon Mary. Mary would know where the money was. He took an Uber to the premium rehab center, using the address from an old email. The facility looked different. When he ran to the front desk, the receptionist looked at him with deep pity. "Are you Mary's son? Why are you just getting here?" "Her private funding ran out 3 months ago. We tried calling you, but the number was dead. She had to be transferred to the state-funded Medicaid ward in the back." Christopher sprinted down the long, depressing corridors to the state-funded wing. It smelled of bleach and urine. In the corner of a crowded communal room, he found his mother. Mary was slumped in a dilapidated wheelchair. She was emaciated, her hair thinning and unkempt, staring blankly at a wall. She wore a stained, generic hospital gown. "Mom, it's me, Christopher. I'm back," he cried, dropping to his knees and grabbing her hands. Mary slowly turned her head. Her cloudy eyes locked onto her golden boy, but instead of crying tears of joy, her face twisted with a feral, deeply entrenched rage. She summoned every ounce of her remaining strength, raised her skeletal hand, and slapped him fiercely across the face. "You worthless bastard," she croaked. "Where were you? You left me here to rot. Your wife sold everything. Did you come back just to see if I was dead yet?" Christopher took the slap, the sting snapping him back to reality. The facility administrator approached, handing him a clipboard. "Sir, you owe $20,000 in back payments for her care. If you can't pay this immediately, we have to transfer her to a county welfare shelter." Christopher stared at the bill. He barely had enough money for a bus ticket, let alone 20 grand. Standing down the hall, holding her baby, Ashley watched the pathetic scene unfold. Her delusion shattered completely. She realized she had bet her youth and her future on a man who was not only broke but a parasitic liability. She turned around and walked out the door, abandoning him forever. Christopher returned to his dark, moldy motel room. The IRS had formally seized the dummy LLC. The loan sharks had found him, leaving voicemails threatening to break his legs. He was trapped. A few days later, on a chilly, overcast afternoon, Christopher was sitting in a grimy roadside diner, eating a cheap plate of fries. On the greasy TV mounted in the corner, a local news channel was playing an arts and culture segment. He glanced up, and his jaw dropped. On the screen was a breathtakingly elegant woman stepping out of a black SUV. She wore a tailored white designer suit, her dark hair cascading perfectly over her shoulders. She exuded power, wealth, and absolute confidence. The lower third caption read, "Philanthropist and art entrepreneur Natalie V, returning from Singapore, invests $50 million in new downtown cultural center. It was me, the wife he thought had died in a ditch from poverty and shame. Christopher rubbed his eyes, unable to comprehend what he was seeing. I was speaking to reporters about art grants, funding youth programs, and revitalizing the city. The stark contrast between his pathetic reality and my stratospheric success hit him like a freight train. His greed instantly overrode his shame. She's a millionaire. We're still technically married. I'm entitled to half of that. After weeks of frantically calling my old associates and harassing Jonathan's law firm, I finally agreed to meet him. The meeting wasn't at a romantic cafe. It was in the sterile, intimidating glass conference room of Jonathan's high-rise law firm. I sat at the head of the long oak table, dressed in a sleek black blazer, idly spinning a gold Mont Blanc pen. The doors opened, and Christopher shuffled in. He looked awful, haggard, paranoid, darting his eyes around the room. Seeing my wealth, he tried to rush forward to grab my hands, but two massive private security guards stepped in his path. He stopped and forced a pathetic smile. "Natalie, you're back. I've been looking everywhere for you. Do you know how worried I was? I'm so sorry. I know I messed up with Ashley. It was a moment of weakness. She tricked me. I still love you." He played his role perfectly, shedding literal crocodile tears. I leaned back in my leather chair, my eyes devoid of emotion. "Are you worried about me, Chris? Or are you worried about your missing ATM machine?" He recoiled, trying to act offended. "How can you say that? We were married for over a decade." I didn't say a word. I slid a massive binder across the table. Christopher's hands shook as he opened it. Inside were the surveillance photos, the wire transfer receipts, the forged HELOC documents, and the medical records detailing the psychotic drugs he had used to poison his mother. "You said you were tricked. Then who forged my signature? Who chemically lobotomized his own mother? Who took out $1 million life insurance policy on his wife and then researched how to cut her brake lines?" Every question was a nail driven into his coffin. Christopher turned pale. The binder slipped from his hands, papers scattering across the floor. He dropped to his knees. "Natalie, please. I owe dangerous people. They're going to kill me. You have so much money. Just save me this one last time, and I swear I'll sign the divorce papers. I'll disappear. Please." Looking at the pathetic creature groveling on the floor, I felt nothing. I stood up, adjusting my blazer. "I'm not a charity, Chris. You reap what you sow. I am only here to watch you realize exactly how much your betrayal is going to cost you." Seeing that begging wouldn't work, Christopher's true, venomous nature snapped back. He scrambled to his feet, a maniacal, ugly grin spreading across his face. "You think you're so smart? Fine. Let's play dirty. You think you hid that massive plot of land your parents left you in Montana from me? That worthless as dirt is being rezoned for commercial tech development. It's worth tens of millions now. We are legally married. I own half of that. Give me half the cash value right now, or I drag you through a brutal public divorce trial and ruin your reputation." I raised an eyebrow, not out of fear, but sheer amazement at his depravity. He had secretly investigated my family's assets. "And don't forget," Christopher sneered, stepping closer, "you're barren. You couldn't give me a child. Now I have a son, a true heir. You owe me alimony and child support. Pay up, or I'll tell the press you're a bitter, infertile woman trying to starve a baby." Jonathan, standing in the corner, tensed up, ready to intervene. But I raised my hand, stopping him. I wanted to see how far the rot went. I walked slowly around the table, stopping a few feet from Christopher. "Do you really think you have any leverage here? You think I'm still that clueless housewife?" I pulled a single sheet of paper from a folder and dropped it in front of him. "That Montana land was transferred to an irrevocable trust before we even got married. It's fully shielded separate property. You aren't entitled to a single grain of dirt." Christopher stared at the deed, his jaw trembling. "But that's not all," I said softly. I reached over to the conference room laptop and clicked play on an audio file. The room filled with the unmistakable voice of Christopher, talking to his shady defense lawyer in a dive bar a year ago. "Natalie won't sign over the land. She's stubborn, but if she has an accident, I'm the sole beneficiary on a $1 million policy. A gas leak in the kitchen. Boom. I get the insurance cash. The land goes to me as next of kin, and I fly off with Ashley." Christopher's eyes bulged out of his skull. He stared at the speakers like they were a ghost. Garrett had tracked down the shady lawyer, who had secretly recorded the conversation for blackmail purposes and bought the tape for a steep price. I paused the audio. The silence in the room was deafening. Did you hear that clearly, Chris? That is premeditated conspiracy to commit murder. Coupled with the insurance fraud and the elder abuse charges, you won't see a dime. You'll be locked in a federal penitentiary until you die. Christopher collapsed back into a chair, hyperventilating. No, I was just drunk. It was just talk. I wouldn't actually do it. Suddenly, the conference room doors opened again. A frail, exhausted woman walked in, clutching a cheap purse to her chest. It was Ashley. Christopher's eyes lit up with a desperate, manic hope. Ashley, tell them I never meant to hurt anyone. Help me. But Ashley didn't run to him. She stood behind the security guard, looking at Christopher with absolute disgust and terror. She pulled a stack of documents from her bag and handed them to Jonathan. I'm here to testify, Ashley said, her voice shaking. I'm pressing charges for domestic abuse and financial fraud. He didn't just con you, Natalie. He conned me. He used my name to open illegal shell companies. She turned to Christopher, tears streaming down her face. You told me you loved me. You told me I'd be a queen. But Natalie showed me the insurance policy you took out on me. You were going to kill me too, weren't you? If I died giving birth, you'd get $500,000. Christopher snapped. The realization that his mistress, his final pawn, was working with me pushed him completely over the edge. You ungrateful bitch, he roared, lunging at Ashley. The security guards instantly slammed him back into the chair. Cornered, exposed, and stripped of everything, Christopher's sanity fractured. He let out a feral, hysterical laugh. You're all trying to destroy me? Fine. If I go down, you're all coming with me to hell. He reached into his oversized coat pocket and pulled out a plastic water bottle filled with a yellowish liquid. He unscrewed the cap and violently slung the liquid across the room. The overpowering stench of gasoline instantly filled the air, splashing across the mahogany table, onto Jonathan's suit, and near my feet. Ashley screamed and ducked under the table. Jonathan lunged forward. Chris, you're insane. Put it down. Christopher's eyes were totally vacant. He pulled a red Bic lighter from his pocket, his thumb hovering over the spark wheel. Don't move. I have nothing left. I'll burn us all alive right now. Before his thumb could strike the flint, the heavy double doors of the conference room burst open. 5 plainclothes police officers, whom Jonathan had preemptively stationed in the adjacent room, swarmed in like a tactical strike force. An officer's baton cracked against Christopher's wrist. The lighter flew across the room, skidding harmlessly into a corner. The officers tackled Christopher, slamming his face into the hardwood floor. Christopher, you are under arrest for attempted arson, terroristic threats, and conspiracy to commit murder. You have the right to remain silent. The lead detective barked as he ratcheted heavy steel handcuffs onto Christopher's wrists. I sat back in my chair, brushing a drop of gasoline off my shoe, completely unfazed. I looked down at him. Christopher's face was smashed against the floor, contorted in agony and humiliation. He looked up at me, tears of sheer panic streaming down his face. Natalie, please, I wasn't going to light it. Have mercy. We were married for 12 years. I stood up, smoothed my blazer, and looked down at him with glacial indifference. Our marriage died the day you drugged your mother's milk and priced my life at $1 million. Enjoy federal prison, Chris. Consider it karma. The officers dragged him out. His pathetic, wailing cries echoed down the hallway until the elevator doors sealed him away. Ashley stayed crouched in the corner, sobbing violently out of sheer terror and regret. A week later, I received a call from the state nursing facility. Mary's condition had rapidly deteriorated. Even though I had severed all emotional ties, I decided to visit her one last time. The state ward was bleak and depressing. I found Mary lying in a cramped bed, IV tubes snaking into her skeletal arms. Hearing my footsteps, she weakly opened her eyes. She already knew Christopher was facing life in prison. The shock had broken whatever was left of her spirit. She tried to reach out, her voice a raspy whisper. Natalie, you came. I thought you hated me. I pulled up a plastic chair but didn't take her hand. I set down a small bag of fruit. I'm leaving the country for an exhibition. I won't be back here. Listen to the doctors. Mary shook her head, tears leaking from her cloudy eyes. I'm dying, Natalie. It's karma. I did something terrible to you. She gripped the edge of her blanket, her breathing labored. Do you know why you couldn't get pregnant all those years? It wasn't you. It was me. My heart skipped a beat. A sickening dread washed over me. Before you got married, a psychic told me that if Christopher had a son with you, he would die an early death. I was so terrified of losing my boy. I secretly crushed birth control pills into your morning vitamins, every day, for years. Forgive me. I'm a monster. The room spun. My endless years of crying in bathrooms, the excruciating fertility treatments, the self-hatred of feeling like a failure as a woman. It was all orchestrated by this selfish, superstitious woman to protect a son who ultimately poisoned her anyway. I stood up abruptly. I wanted to scream. I wanted to strangle her. But looking at the dying, pathetic shell of a woman, I realized anger was useless. Her ultimate punishment was dying entirely alone, knowing her actions destroyed her own bloodline. I won't sue you, I said, my voice eerily calm. I will just let you die alone with your sins. Goodbye, Mary. I walked out of the room, leaving her agonizing sobs to echo in the sterile hallway. A month later, on the day of Christopher's sentencing, the sky over Seattle was brilliantly blue. I sat in the gallery of the federal courthouse, wearing a crisp white dress. Christopher stood at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, his head shaved, looking small and broken. He didn't dare look back at me. The judge read the charges: conspiracy to commit murder, wire fraud, elder abuse, and attempted arson. The gavel slammed down. 25 years to life in federal prison. I walked out of the courthouse, the warm sun hitting my face. Ashley was waiting by the steps, holding her son. Natalie, she whispered, looking down at the pavement. I'm taking my baby back to my hometown in Ohio. I'm going to work at my sister's bakery. I'm so sorry. I looked at the girl. She was a victim of her own greed, but a victim nonetheless. I handed her a thick envelope containing $10,000 in cash. Go home. Start over. Your son is innocent. Raise him to be a good man, not like his father. Ashley wept, bowing her head in gratitude, and walked away into the crowd. Jonathan walked down the courthouse steps and handed me a manila envelope. Congratulations, Natalie. The divorce decree is finalized. You are entirely free. I held the paper. It wasn't just a legal document. It was a ticket to a second life. The next morning, I woke up in my luxury high-rise condo overlooking Puget Sound. I stepped out onto the balcony holding a cup of chamomile tea, breathing in the crisp, salty air. Below, the ferries drifted peacefully across the sparkling blue water. 12 years ago, I was a naive girl who believed in fairy tale love and endless sacrifice. I gave everything to a man, only to be butchered in return. But standing here now, the pain felt like an old scar. It reminded me of the past, but it no longer bled. My phone buzzed. It was an email from the New York Arts Council. They were finalizing the logistics for my upcoming solo exhibition, titled Rebirth. The paintings I had created from my tears and isolation were now propelling me onto the global stage. I smiled, taking a sip of my tea. I thought I had lost everything, but it turned out, by letting go of the things that were meant to destroy me, I had gained the entire world.